Hello, America. Welcome to the Glenn Beck program. Just got back from Washington, D.C. Holy cow. It's not just my arms. I'm just wiped out. I don't know how the president is keeping this schedule. It was a whirlwind. And if you look at all of the stuff that he's doing, I'm more optimistic than I ever have been. He not only gets it, knows right where he's going. He is going down to the roots as he's pulling stuff out. If you listen to the radio show today, you know that. I took 3 hours just going through what he's done so far, most of which happened yesterday. The left, of course, is freaking out, but oh well. One of the things they're freaking out about is Greenland and Panama. In a post announcing his pick for U.S. ambassador to Denmark, he said, and I quote, "For purposes of national security and freedom throughout the world, the United States of America feels the ownership and control of Greenland is an absolute necessity." A couple weeks after that post, Donald Trump Jr. visited Greenland, which, of course, made Democrats all over start to do this. Mainstream media had a cow, made it sound like the U.S. is gearing up for a full-on military invasion. One common theme in the media is that Trump's interest in Greenland will give permission to President Xi Jinping to take Taiwan and Putin to shop for his next land grab. Oh my gosh. At least you could say they're creative. Look at the creative writing that's happening there. The Guardian claiming that Donald Trump Jr. invited homeless people and drug dealers off the street in Greenland and gave them a free lunch to make it look like he had a bunch of naive Trump fans. How do they get away with this? The Guardian journalists reach out to Arthur Schwartz, a friend of Trump Jr.'s, for comment about the claim. Schwartz called her claim, quote, "beyond the pale of ridiculous," and wondered how Trump Jr. could have possibly done that since cameras followed him around the entire day he was in Greenland. Naturally, the Guardian story ran anyway. Well, spoiler alert, we're not going to invade Greenland.
What's the deal with Greenland and the Panama Canal? Are we using or considering use of military force in any of those situations?
No, look, we don't have to use military force, Shannon. The thing that people always ignore is we already have troops in Greenland. Greenland is really important for America strategically.
Okay. Do you know the U.S. Virgin Islands? Do you know how we got those? We bought them from Denmark. You know that? This used to happen all the time. America's northernmost air base has been Greenland for over 70 years, and the U.S. has maintained a military presence in Greenland since World War II, when we were saving the butts of Denmark. President Trump's interest in Greenland is not for some random real estate scheme. The U.S. has a long history of interaction with Greenland. It's the world's largest island, which is 3 times the size of Texas. That's mighty big, I reckon, as we would say in Texas. At its closest point, the western coast of Greenland is 16 miles from Canada, the 51st state. It's a population of over 56,000 people, mostly Inuit, or Eskimos, if you want to be completely politically incorrect. Denmark has essentially ruled Greenland as part of its kingdom since the 1700s. Nations buying territory from each other, that was a normal thing. 1917, bought some islands just southeast of Puerto Rico. What happened? We bought it for $25 million, $650 million in today's dollars. Those were the islands we renamed, bing, the U.S. Virgin Islands. The purchase was made largely because the U.S. was about to enter World War I, and there was fear that Germany would use the islands as a naval base that would threaten American interests in the region, especially the Panama Canal. So let me just ask you this. So it's okay when progressive hero President Woodrow Wilson buys some islands for national security reasons, but it's insane when President Trump wants to do it. I just want to get it straight there. Now, fast forward to 1940 when Nazi Germany occupied Denmark. That's when we moved. And we moved to Greenland with a base of operations to keep the Germans from going to Greenland and grabbing Greenland. When it became clear after the war that A, the U.S. has a massive new problem on its hands with the Soviet Union, and B, that Denmark was never going to do squat with a giant empty island anyway, President Harry Truman offered to buy Greenland for $100 million in gold. Okay, Denmark said, nah, I don't think so. We want it. By 1951, the U.S. had an agreement with Denmark that made America the military defender of Greenland. The Pentagon built a ridiculously named Air Force base. I think it's Beek. Oh, there it is. Beek, space base. Oh, yeah. Anyway, it's an air base 750 miles north of the Arctic Circle on the northwestern coast of Greenland.
The job was to build a giant air base for our largest long-range bombers high on the northwest coast of Greenland at a tiny settlement called Thule. Built with the permission of the Danish government, the base would push our defense line 2,000 miles to the north.
Oh my gosh. So, Beek, the air base, so remote that there's only one way in or out. It's military flight. Or a ship that comes once a year. It's like Santa. It's situated halfway between Washington, D.C. and Moscow. The Pentagon still views this base as kind of really strategically important for deterring Russia and detecting incoming ICBMs. In fact, its radar system got a $40 million upgrade under Donald Trump as 45 in 2017. Now, there was a little problem. In the early years of the Cold War, the Pentagon also built a research base called Camp Century, and we built it underneath the polar ice cap. It was about 150 miles east of the Air Force Base.
Today, Camp Century is being operated as a year-round Arctic research center. The men who built the camp have long since been replaced by military and civilian scientists from the Polar Research and Development Program. As part of man's efforts to probe deeper and deeper into the secrets of the universe, an elaborate program of tests and experiments is being carried out.
To power Camp Century, a nuclear reactor was installed. Now this kind of set off a firestorm in Denmark because they are very anti-nuclear. Okay, turns out the nuclear reactor was the least of their worries. It's the safest form of energy. But in 1968, a fire broke out on board an Air Force bomber flying just north of the Arctic Circle. You're not going to believe you've never heard this story. The crew bailed out, and the bomber crashed into the sea of ice, a fjord west of Beek. Okay, so what happened? That particular, I would have loved to have been on the phone call with Denmark. Okay, this particular bomber was carrying 4 nuclear bombs. It didn't explode in the crash, so we had that going for us. But it was leaking radioactive material across the fjord around the crash site. The crash severely strained the U.S. arrangement with Denmark because the Danish had banned any nuclear weapons within its borders. And technically, it wasn't supposed to technically be in the borders. It was going to be above the borders, and then it crashed. Who could, hey, act of God. In spite of that, the U.S. had been flying bombers loaded with nukes in and out of Greenland for years. Because, we're going to tell Danish the truth? It's a breakfast food, not a country. Anyway, it wasn't until 1995 that a Danish government report revealed that a former prime minister of Denmark had actually given secret approval to the U.S. to fly nuclear weapons into Greenland. In 1968, the U.S. just wanted to let the bomber wreckage and the sea ice, contaminated with radioactive material to sink to the fjord. But we had that Air Force base we had to care about. Operation Beek Air Base was on the line, and Denmark demanded that all of the wreckage and radioactive ice be removed. So we did it. So the Air Force launched Operation Crested Sea. It was minus 75 degrees. 80-mile-an-hour wind. I don't even know if the wind chill factor even counts at that point, but military crews swept the fjord with Geiger counters, and they collected every scrap of the plane wreckage, loaded sections of contaminated ice into sealed containers, and then the cleanup operation that took 8 months was over. I think we just took that ice and just shoved it out of the plane on the way back to America over Canada, but I'm not sure about that. What are they going to say? What are they going to say? They're the 51st state. This is the historic backdrop of President Trump's assertion that more involvement in Greenland is an absolute necessary. Now, I want to look at some other reasons Trump is prioritizing this. We're going to take a quick break, and then I'll come back and I'll also talk to you about an agreement that might work without actually having to buy Greenland outright. Next. All right, we've heard a lot about the Los Angeles fires recently. We're going to hear more about it. President Trump is going to be on the ground in Los Angeles on Friday. It's the fires, a space larger than the size of San Francisco has burned, and there are at least 25 people dead. 400,000 people have been left without power. 180,000 have been forced to evacuate with hardly any time to get any kind of necessities. Imagine finding yourself in that kind of situation. What if you couldn't get your medications from your home because it was on fire? You also couldn't get them from the pharmacy because it was on fire. Well, there is something you could do to ensure that you and your loved ones have medical care when it's needed in an emergency. The Jace case offers peace of mind, but it's also there for like vacations and things like that. You could use this. Make sure you have the medication your family needs. It's a personalized emergency kit that contains essential medications that treat the most common and deadly bacterial infections. It provides 5 life-saving antibiotics for emergency use. You just fill out a simple form online. You'll have it in case you need it. They even have ivermectin in as an add-on if you want it. So go to jase.com, jase.com, enter the promo code BECK10 at checkout for your discount on the order. It's promo code BECK10 at jase.com. Well, President Trump first floated the idea of buying Greenland from Denmark in 2019, and he was ridiculed for it. Even though, as I showed you, before the break, Greenland has been a strategic partner for the U.S. for almost 85 years, and he's not the first one to try to bring it up to buy it. Bringing up the idea of Greenland caused a little bit of a rift with Denmark at the time. When Denmark insisted Greenland was not for sale, Trump canceled the trip to Copenhagen, which kind of ticked off the Danish, and the former prime minister called the move, quote, deeply insulting to the people of Greenland and Denmark. Now, it took about a year, but they got over it. The Trump administration patched things up enough to reopen the U.S. consulate in Greenland for the first time since 1953. Now, that's an important move for 2 main reasons: Russia and China. Greenland is rare. It's an emerging nation in the age of globalization. They are slowly gaining more autonomy from Denmark. In 2009, Greenland became self-governing when 75% of the voters approved the measure through referendum. Greenland has its own parliament, but it's still entirely dependent on Denmark for defense and a $500 million annual subsidy that pays for Greenland's welfare state. Still, the independence movement seems to be gaining steam in Greenland. This New Year's speech a few weeks ago, Greenland's prime minister said his country wasn't treated well by Denmark. It's still stuck in the colonial era, and it's time to move on. He also announced that, quote, work has already begun on creating the framework for Greenland as an independent state. That's right. It could be a 51st state. We're cool with that. What? Under its agreement with Denmark, Greenland has the right to hold an independent referendum, but it's still subject to approval by the Danish parliament. Now, Why does this matter to us? Why should I talk to you about this? Well, because an independent Greenland without close U.S. involvement could see them partner with Russia and China instead. And when it comes to trade, minerals, energy production, Greenland is one of the last great untapped resources on Earth. We cannot allow it to fall into those hands. Now, the U.S. Geological Survey found the Arctic region could contain 30% of the world's undiscovered gas and 13% of its undiscovered oil. Greenland also has some of the world's largest untapped deposits of rare earth minerals, including graphite, copper, and lithium, that are essential for making all kinds of tech, vehicles, and planes. Now, China has had the stronghold on refining the Earth's rare minerals. And it's insane. The U.S. gets 72% of our rare earth minerals from China. That's not sustainable. In December, China stopped shipment of rare earth minerals to the U.S. in retaliation for new restrictions on the export of semiconductors and chip-making equipment from China. Is that a problem? China has also been pursuing opportunity and influence in Greenland for years. They tried to finance the construction of 3 new airports in Greenland, a deal which only fell through in 2018 when the then Secretary of Defense, Jim Mattis, lobbied the Danish government to intervene and stop it. Well, Danish banks then got together to offer an alternative financing deal that Greenland accepted. China owns a major stake in a mine in Greenland, and that was expected to produce around 10% of the world's rare earth minerals. They had a deal in place to process all of the materials mined from the site, but that project stalled in 2021 when an environmentalist party had won election in Greenland and installed the current prime minister. Then there's China's collaboration with Russia to develop new shipping lanes in the Arctic. Is that a problem? Russia has taken the lead in the effort, building nuclear-powered icebreaker ships. In 2018, China initiated what it called the Polar Silk Road Project, which aims to cut cargo ship travel time to the European market in half. But most alarming are the joint military drills in the Arctic that Russia and China have recently started in the last few years.
To assert its interests, Russia is using the Arctic to test hypersonic missiles designed to avoid American defences. In August, Russia and China sent a flotilla of warships to patrol waters just off Alaska. And Moscow now commands a third more Arctic bases than the US and NATO combined. Experts say the West lags 10 years behind Russia's military in the region.
Yeah, that's a problem. Is it becoming a little bit clearer? This isn't about Trump's ego. This isn't about expansionism just to expand. If the U.S. doesn't step up our involvement in Greenland, there are 2 other very eager customers who will. The leaders of Greenland and Denmark are still insisting that Greenland is not for sale. Everything's for sale. Come on. Earlier this month, Greenland's prime minister said, and I quote, "We don't want to be Danes, but we also don't want to be Americans. We want to be Greenlanders." Do it, baby. Do it. Just come on in, you know? At the same time, he admitted later in the same process of that conference, that press conference, that Greenland is ready to talk with President Trump. See what I'm saying? Oh, no, yes. The Danish government, that was so sexist. Why would he even say that? That is, in the time of Me Too, those days are over. Anyway, the Danish government has also reportedly sent private messages to Donald Trump's team expressing their willingness to discuss Greenland. There's a lot of major moving parts here, so there probably won't be a deal done anytime soon. But Denmark and Greenland openness to talk is a positive sign. Now, the agreement that might actually work without having to buy Greenland is a compact of free association. It's kind of like the Articles of Confederation. It's the same arrangement the U.S. has with Micronesia, Palau, the Marshall Islands. Basically, the U.S. gives economic aid to those guys, and then they have access to certain government programs like Medicaid, and their citizens can live and work in the U.S. In return, the U.S. gets to operate military forces and establish bases inside those nations' boundaries, and it works out well for everybody. A compact of free association with Greenland would give the U.S. essentially what it wants while allowing for Greenland's independence and not totally freezing out Denmark. Brampa. Some special trade privileges could also ensure China and Russia keep their paws off of Greenland's natural resources. Greenland is worthy of a serious conversation because of China alone. China has its tentacles spread all over the globe, including the other hotspot President Trump has been talking about lately, and that is the Panama Canal. We go there next. Saturday night, before I went to Washington, I was in Naples, Florida, and I was speaking at the fundraiser for preborn, and I didn't get paid for that. I wanted to go and do that. I volunteered to go and help them raise money because Tanya and I believe in preborn almost unlike any other thing that we are involved in. I mean, I know where every dollar goes. I know who's running it. I know who controls it. And it's compassion. It is real compassion, saving 300,000 babies' lives so far. I'd like to ask you if you would help with their journey. One ultrasound is $28. $140 would cover 5 babies. I mean, you double the chances of life. Just dial pound 250, pound 250, say the keyword baby, pound 250, keyword baby, or you could also donate securely at preborn.com/Glenn. That's preborn.com/Glenn.
The Panama Canal Zone is sovereign United States territory, just as much as Alaska is, as well as the states carved from the Louisiana Purchase. We bought it, we paid for it, and General Torrijos should be told we're going to keep it.
I was too young to remember when Panama was in the news, other than Manuel Noriega. Remember that guy? That was Ronald Reagan on the campaign trail in 1976, 50 years ago. Kind of a good reminder, Panama Canal has been a contentious issue for the U.S. for a long time. So when President Trump brought up the Panama Canal last month, people went nuts. Same with Greenland. But Greenland, we're not going to go in militarily for Greenland. We're just not going to do it. Would it be smart for America? Best $1 trillion investment we could ever make. Now, Panama, the Panama Canal, not baseless provocation. In some strongly worded social media post about the Panama Canal, Trump said, and I quote, "The Panama Canal is considered a vital national asset for the United States due to its critical role in America's economy and national security." Okay? Nothing controversial about that. I mean, it was ours. He went on to say that if certain conditions don't change with the canal, quote, "We will demand that the Panama Canal be returned to us in full and without question." Okay. Jimmy Carter gave this thing away. I mean, we're so stupid. We're like, oh, you know what? We're sorry for everything we did in 1400 and 1492 and a little bit ashamed of 1494. I'm so sick of this. We bought this land. Then we sold it for $1. See, kids, this is why socialism always ends to poverty. Now, 2 weeks ago, House Republicans introduced a bill that would authorize talks for the U.S. to repurchase the Panama Canal. I'll give you inflation of 100%. I'm going to give you $2 to get it back. In response to Trump's comments, the president of Panama released a statement saying, quote, "Every square meter of the canal belongs to Panama, and it will continue belonging to Panama." Okay. Now, in a follow-up news conference, he added that he and President Trump have nothing to discuss regarding the U.S. buying back the Panama Canal. Now, Trump, being a good negotiator, said, quote, "We'll see about that." Okay. The Panama Canal, this one is even more vital than Greenland is. Greenland would be good, and it is important. But between 13 and 14,000 ships use the canal every single year. That's 40% of all of the world's cargo ship traffic. Kind of a big deal from, who was the visionary again? Oh, that's right, us. Around 72% of the ships using the canal are either headed for or leaving U.S. ports. Then there's the importance of the canal for U.S. Navy. Having to go around the southern tip of South America would add 8,000 miles for naval ships that need to transfer just between oceans during a crisis. As with Greenland, you can't ignore the historic context with the Panama Canal. Panama only exists as a nation because of us. They weren't even a nation. I mean, its story is a little dicey, and it involves Teddy Roosevelt. And honestly, whenever you get Teddy Roosevelt involved in things, you're like, I'm not sure that's right. But Panama was part of the nation of Colombia. The U.S. approached Colombia about building a canal across the Isthmus of Panama. But Colombia said, "How dare you? That's ridiculous. Who's going to use that?" Then things got a little shady because Theodore Roosevelt, in his nation-building instinct, he might have done a little pre-CIA stuff, you know. The U.S. encouraged the Panamanian government to go into an independence movement. November 1903, the movement overthrew the local Colombian government and declared Panama independent. Okay. Well, before Colombia could get the troops to Panama, the White House had ordered a U.S. warship to park off the coast of Panama, you know, just for a little insurance. The intimidation worked, and Colombia did not intervene. Now, as soon as Panama was declared independent, we said, wow, we love this new nation. And we signed a new treaty with the new government allowing the U.S. to build the Panama Canal. That's how I got. Panama got $10 million in the deal, plus an annual payment of $250,000. The U.S. got total control of the 51-mile canal zone. Okay. So then we had to build it. We sent the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. It took them 10 years to complete the canal. Cost of $375 million, the most expensive construction project up to the time, in U.S. history. President Theodore Roosevelt visited the construction site in 1906. It was the first overseas travel by a sitting U.S. president. It's kind of important. Fast forward half a century to the 1960s, and now all this anti-colonialism bullcrap started to happen in developing nations, including a growing resentment in Panama towards the U.S. control of the Panama Canal, ran through the country. Gee, I wonder who was seeding that. I mean, don't get me wrong, we sucked a lot in South America. But in 1964, tensions over the flying of U.S. flags in the canal zone boiled over to rioting, and it killed 4 U.S. soldiers and 22 Panamanians. That's when President Johnson decided, you know what, let's negotiate with Panama for the eventual transfer of the control of the canal. The negotiation dragged on through Nixon and then the Ford administration, and then comes the peanut farmer. I'm sorry. We should respect the dead. Oh, I got the flag at half staff here so we can make fun of it. Now, what happened? Well, we complicated things a bit by getting really involved. And then 1968, General Omar Torrijos, is that right? Torrijos seized power in a coup. Coups are never good. Torrijos was close buddies with Fidel Castro. That association caused a major split in the U.S. Congress, with many Republicans opposed to giving up the control of the canal to a communist-friendly dictator. But luckily, Joe Biden wasn't in yet. Henry Kissinger, who was the Secretary of State under Nixon and Ford, grew concerned that the U.S. might end up in another Vietnam War type situation in Panama. And they said, let's get rid of this darn thing. By the time Jimmy Carter came in, he's like, yeah, you know what? I carry my own luggage. Actually, I don't, but I make it look like that. The baggage of Vietnam and CIA-backed coups in places like Guatemala and Chile created enough foreign entanglement that we were fatigued. America was fatigued by this. Congress was like, okay, just get rid of it. It's the Panama Canal Treaty. So 1977, Carter signed it alongside Panama's dictator. There they are, a dictator and Jimmy Carter. Hi, how are you? Well, I'm good. You just gave me a very strategic asset. So he died in a plane crash 4 years later. I wonder what happened. His protege, Manuel Noriega, rose to power in the 1980s. He wasn't a good guy. A brutal dictator, really. Massive drug trafficker. He pocketed hundreds of millions of dollars in drug money, among other crimes. It's kind of ironic that foreign entanglements and sponsoring regime changes that were helped to use and to push the U.S. into the Canal Treaty with Panama because in 1989, President George H.W. Bush sent 27,000 troops into Panama to remove Noriega from power. It only took 2 weeks for Noriega to surrender. He was tried and he was convicted and spent most of the rest of his life in prisons here in the U.S., France, and then Panama. Control of the canal was officially handed over to Panama on December 31st, 1999. Wow, same time the English just handed over Hong Kong. Remember that? That wasn't a mistake either. Ever since, the canal has been operated by the Panama Canal Authority, which is owned by the Panamanian government. Well, guess who saw opportunity in the change of ownership of the Panama Canal? Right, China. At more than $480 billion, China's overall trade with Latin America countries is now 35 times more than it was when Panama first took over the canal. China has been so committed to Latin American influence that it even had a deal in place 10 years ago to construct their own canal across Nicaragua. Fortunately, the deal that fell apart was that one, because environmental concerns and the fact that the project would displace thousands of families. That's the one time I cheer for the environmentalist. In the meantime, however, 22 Latin Americans and Caribbean nations have joined Canada's Belt and Road Initiative. China, sorry. Guess who was the first to join that little Chinese party? Panama. China. Panama, shortly after, Panama cut diplomatic ties with Taiwan. Whoa, really? There are now 200,000 Chinese living in Panama. The U.S. is still number one customer of the canal, but China is now number two. The canal is a choke point that China seeks to control. It's controlled by a Hong Kong company. Wait a minute. Didn't the British give Hong Kong away in 1999 as well? They manage, this company, C.K. Hutchinson, 2 of the 5 main ports that service the canal, 1 on each side. Chinese companies, as you know, do not operate independently from their communist government. Coffin sales tend to go up around those companies when they do try to do things that China doesn't want to happen. China is currently building a 4th bridge over the canal. Now, Chinese tech company Huawei provides telecommunication service for much of the canal zone. Isn't that great? Now, that was the company that was banned from selling equipment in the U.S. since 2022. Why? Because of the backdoor spying software built into its devices. And surveillance cameras for the canal, also provided by Hikvision. Hikvision, I love that. Is that a company out of West Virginia? No, it's a company largely owned by the Chinese government-controlled defense firm. Hikvision's surveillance cameras are used to monitor and arrest the Uyghurs in China. They help round all those people up. Just think what they can do here. All of this Chinese infrastructure that has been built up around the canal over the past 25 years could pose a serious U.S. national security threat. In 2021, a single ship ran aground and got lodged sideways, blocking the Suez Canal for about a week. Remember that? It cost the global economy $10 billion. Now, earlier this week, I talked to Gordon Chang, or was it last week? He's a journalist and a lawyer who spent decades studying China. He's concerned the next global war might start with a similar accident in the Panama Canal. If hostilities broke out between China and the U.S., China could easily collapse their bridge over the canal or lodge ships at either side of the canal. It would not take much to cripple the canal and U.S. trade and naval capability along with it. The Trump administration is considering China's growing influence in Panama, and they consider it a violation of the U.S.-Panama treaties that require the canal to remain neutral. And from the sounds of his inaugural address on Monday, the new White House doesn't seem to be messing around.
And above all, China is operating the Panama Canal, and we didn't give it to China. We gave it to Panama, and we're taking it back.
Now, I don't think President Trump is very happy with China right now, going out on a limb. And for plenty of good reasons. I'll explain those to you next. I'm not saying that there's a global war coming, but I'm not saying it either. Actually, I'm saying these are great strategic things to do. You've got to prepare and pay attention to new things. That's why I want to talk to you about My Patriot Supply. They got their 4-week emergency food kit right there in the book. It's 100% of the recommended daily value of 12 vitamins and minerals. It's good food. I mean, the macaroni and cheese, the chili mac is really good. The bread's good. I mean, really, pretty much everything in it is good. Not that I've been, stress eating in my basement at all when my wife was gone. My Patriot Supply, it's offering $50 off their 4-week emergency food kit, 2,000 calories per day for a whole 3 months. Get one of those for every member of the family. Their food kits last up to 25 years in storage. They're really, really good. Right now, they're offering $50 off the 4-week food kit. So go to mypatriotsupply.com right now. Grab yours. Don't put it off. Now is the time to prepare. mypatriotsupply.com.
We welcomed the Chinese Communist Party into the global order, and they took advantage of all of its benefits, and they ignored all of its obligations and responsibilities. Instead, they have repressed and lied and cheated and hacked and stolen their way into global superpower status, and they have done so at our expense and at the expense of the people of their own country.
He's just a warmonger. That's what's happening there. Do you ever feel like Doc, I keep saying these things, but everybody thinks I'm crazy. I don't know what to do. Well, you have any evidence? Oh, I've got plenty of evidence, Doc. I keep saying it over and over again. For instance, China hacked into the U.S. databases. China just hacked into the Treasury Department. I don't know if you saw that. It's just the Treasury Secretary's Office of Foreign Assets Control, but really, that's it. Well, not exactly. Prior to that, there was the Chinese government espionage campaign that broke into 9 U.S. telecommunications companies. So I don't know. Is that even worth mentioning, Doc? Is it? I mean, AT&T, T-Mobile, Verizon, it was only 1 million Americans. So I feel kind of crazy bringing that up, but they were able to collect text messages and call records and even audio of phone calls, mostly in the D.C. area. But everybody says I'm crazy for not trusting China. What else could be in D.C.? They're probably just scooping up stuff for kids, on TikTok. And then 2 years ago, there was Ford that announced a major partnership with KATL That's a Chinese electric vehicle battery maker. They had $1 billion project to make EV batteries. And they were doing it in Michigan because I always get yelled at because, Doc, everybody thinks I'm crazy when I go off on Michigan's Governor Gretchen Whitmer. But she facilitated this $2 billion deal with the Chinese because it was going to be so good, you know? And she gave them all kinds of tax breaks and everything else. But, yeah, I mean, I'm just checking with you, Doc. I mean, they just added it to the Pentagon's list of companies that qualify as Chinese military companies. So now we have the Chinese military company in Michigan. Is it just me, Doc? Is it just me? Because I kind of feel like I'm being raped right now by China. And I'm not really attracted to China all that much. And they've never bought me a drink or anything. I mean, I've had Chinese food before, but I hear it's very different than what they have, and I always pay for it. I think we should stop the rape. What the hell is wrong with people? What is wrong with America? This doesn't make any sense. China is using capitalism as a weapon against us, and it's working. All these deals and partnerships create leverage. So when they got caught hacking our communications and the U.S. Treasury Department, they know we're not going to come down on them. We're not. Do you remember when they were poisoning our dogs and our dogs were like, I think there's lead in my kibble food? Remember? Nobody did anything. Why? Well, there's too much money to be made there. We don't want to embarrass the Chinese. I don't want to embarrass them either, but I would like them to not, turn us into a communist country. That would be bad. I would like them not to poison our dogs with the poison dog food. I'd like them not to tap our phones, to spy on our companies, to steal our $25 billion planes. But you don't want to hack them off. Here's the thing. The facade that China can be both hardcore communist and American-friendly capitalist, yeah, that's not working out. That's about to come crashing down. Xi Jinping said in his New Year's message this month that reunification with Taiwan is inevitable. You know what? That's what Donald Trump needs to call the Panama Canal and Greenland, just a reunification. In December, China unveiled 2 6th-generation fighter jets. As well as sending a record number of warships into the waters surrounding Taiwan. Nothing to worry about. They only make the most important computer chips and the only place that make those computer chips in the world. Well, maybe they're making them on Mars. Maybe that's why Elon wants to go there. In September, China conducted its first ICBM test launch over the Pacific since 1980. That seems like something we should note. China is building what is described as D-Day style landing barges. Why? Because they want to invade Taiwan. China is going to war with somebody sooner than later, and it could be very, very soon. And when they do, China will use all of its spheres of influence around the globe to give it strategic advantage. So if we're like, hey, you don't want to go into Taiwan, we're not going to have the easy access to that canal. China pretends to make friends with pretty much everyone. Let's be honest. They are the slut of Asia. They are. They sleep with anyone for cash. They'll do it. And they'll pay out cash too. They're also the biggest John in the world. They'll go to any country that's like, oh yeah, China. Oh, I want you. Even though they don't want it. They don't want it. Even the way they're dressed. But they'll take it from China because it's cash. The friendships that China makes, never mutual. You know, they have their way, and then you're left hanging. you know? And it's on to another whore for China. I get it, you bastards. It's always only about China and what feels good for China. They've become an expert at using capitalism as a weapon to bludgeon the West. The old Soviet Union was a formidable army and a really nasty enemy. But it was nothing, couldn't hold a candle to the modern China in their level of sophisticated subversion. Maybe it's just me, and it could be just me. I'm thinking that maybe if we don't get a handle on China, like really, really super soon, we're going to have trouble. So here's what I'd like to suggest. Everybody stay calm. Everybody stay calm. Let the world's greatest negotiator for real estate, because let me just be honest with you, what do Panama and Greenland have in common? They're both real estate deals. So I would suggest the guy who is known for his bargaining on real estate go into Greenland and Denmark and maybe swing by Panama at some point and try to strike a deal, you know? He can do what he did with Tiffany's and say, you know, we're just going to build really ugly buildings all the way around you, so nobody will want to come because it'll be an ugly street that you're always looking at. And maybe, like Tiffany's, he can build the, you know, Trump Tower, which is a beautiful, the greatest tower Trump has ever built. And we can all go home happy and without a war. He's not an expansionist for being an expansionist. He is a guy who is looking for the future of our country. Unlike every single president we've seen in our lifetime, he's actually thinking, what would be good for America? I don't want to apologize for America anymore. I'd like to stop looking at the past and start planning for a future. What are we going to need in the future? Well, if you want to survive the near term, you need the Panama Canal. If you want to be a force to be reckoned with, you cannot give all of the rare earth minerals to Greenland, to China or Russia. You can't. You cannot give up the Arctic Circle and stay safe. I got to tell you, pray for President Trump and Secretary of State Marco Rubio, because I think they understand the urgent threat that China poses, and they plan on changing the status quo. I mean, say whatever you want about that enormous boy, Barron. I mean, big boy. Say whatever you want. He's never taken money from the Chinese. And I don't think Daddy has either. So I know that's hard for those Democrats to shift gears. It kind of grinds. Wait a minute, no bribery or corruption. I know that's hard for Democrats to understand, but I think you should try, because these two actually matter on the world stage. It ain't no Ukraine. I don't envy the job they have ahead of them. I pray for them, and I pray for you too. Thank you. Good night.